Hey, this is Passy from Passy's World of ICT, and welcome to our next learning lessons where we're going to create the database and the tables required for the system solution we are building for Passy's Bargain Barn, the retail business, which was outlined in the previous lesson, which we did. Now, what we're going to cover in this lesson is we'll be looking at the design of the database, which we made already, and creating a blank start database we can work from to build our tables, and then we'll put some test data into those tables. We will set up relationships between the tables which link them together. So that is our plan, and we need to get to it. So first up, we need to have a look at the tables design. Now that's across here in Microsoft Excel. So there is a download file that you can get for this lesson, and details of that will be in the YouTube video description. And there's also a guide, a written guide that goes through step by step what we've done in this video, all of the steps annotated for the video, and the link to that will also be in the video description. Okay, let's look at this first table. So we've got the fields down here that we need to build. This is the stock items table, and the field types here and how long they need to be. This last column here, the validation, we won't really be doing anything with that until later on in a validation lesson, so don't worry about that one too much. Okay, there's also a sellers table we're going to build for the people selling items in this bargain barn, and their fields are down the side here. What type they have to be? Well, they're all pretty much text except for the date of payment, which is a date field, and how long those fields need to be. And again, don't worry too much about the validation. Okay, so what do we do next? Well, the first thing we need to do is the designs are there in the guide document. First thing we need to do is create the database, and these are the steps to do it. So if you get the accompanying guide, which goes with this video, you'll be able to follow through with this step by step. But let's get into Microsoft Access and let's get started. Okay, when you start up Access, the screen will look like this. So this is when you first start the app, and we're just going to use a new blank database. All right, so we don't have templates. Sometimes there'll be a whole lot of templates across here as well. We don't have that with us, but we're just going to click on that, and we need to give our database a name. So we're going to call this Bargain Barn. And we'll just call it Bargain Barn Work. Now, before you click this create button, the next thing you need to do is go across to the folder that's there. So on the folder, we're going to find somewhere to put this database. So we'll just navigate somewhere on the computer here, and let's just put it here in our Microsoft Access database. So we're saying OK on that. Then we can click the create button, which will take us to this screen. Now, we are using Microsoft Access 2016 for this tutorial. We had hoped to have 2019. 2019 isn't available yet here in Australia. We thought the date would be 1st of October, but it isn't. It's going to be available sometime in the next few weeks. Because we were scheduled to make this video, we're making it in 2016. But look, from what we've looked at on the internet, 2019 for the things we're doing here is identical to 2016. If it turns out there are major differences when we get 2019, well, we'll go back and add some annotations onto this video so you can see that. Okay, now once we've done this, the next thing we need to do is go into design view. So up in the top left-hand corner here, it's got a view icon. We click on that and we go to design view. It'll ask us to save the table. So this first table we're going to make is going to be the stock items table. So let's just call that stock items and click OK. Now, this will bring us into design view where we specify the field names and the data types we're using, which is material we'll get directly off the Excel spreadsheet. So if we go back to this spreadsheet here, we could see for the stock items table, we've got an item code that's text that needs to be 10 long. So that's the first thing we're adding in. So in access, this thing here is going to be the item code. Now we don't want it to be auto number. That's going to make it allocate numbers done by access. We just need it to be short text. So we're going to be short text, and this particular item, when we check it, had a length of 10. Okay, because it's going to be 5 letters and 5 digits, but we need to go now down the bottom here where it's got field size, and we set that to a field size of 10. Okay, next we go back to the spreadsheet and look at our next field, which is status. Now, status is a text field and it has a length of 12. Okay, so back in Access here, we're going to set up our status field. We're going to have it as short text, and down here 255 is way too much space, which will waste space in the database, so we need to bring that down to the 12 value it was supposed to be. Now we just keep going doing this, defining all of our fields. You can put descriptions here on the right hand side, but we're not going to bother doing that this time through. So we'll just pause the video and we're going to go through and we're going to do condition, short text, prices, currency, get all these fields entered in with all of their correct length specified here in the Excel document, the design document we're working off, and then we'll come back to the video. Okay, so we've finished entering that data. Now, if you have a look, item ID code, status, condition, how you got price into currency here, there was a drop-down arrow. And so instead of the default short text, we've chosen currency because that one's in money. And you'll notice the description is long text. When you use long text, it's equivalent of the old memo field, so it gives you like a box you can type in, I think up to 300 characters. Then we've got short text, and listing start date, of course, is a date time type field. Now that they are all defined, we go up to this left-hand corner view, and we've changed over to Datasheet view. So over in Datasheet view, save the table in this little box that comes up, you just say yes. And over in Datasheet view now, it has set up those fields we defined as the headings, and we can start typing in data. So when you download the accompanying guide that goes with this lesson, it'll have the data in there, and it's pretty much a matter of just looking at the guide and typing the data in. So our item ID code for the example on our first item is RCCAR and 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, 1. The status of that item is available at the moment, so it hasn't been sold in the barn. The condition is that it's used. It has a price on it of $30, so we just enter in here our $30. The category for this item is toys. Now, some of the categories might be longer than this, so you can go up here until you get the double arrows there. See, next to category on the right-hand side, we've got the double arrows. And what you do is you pull them out a bit just to make that wider. And description will need to be wider too. So here, you can get right next to it till the double arrows appear. Then you push down with the mouse and you drag, and that will give you more length for that. Listing start date, its name's been chopped off there, so we can just stretch that guy out a bit as well, and that's going to enable us to do those things. Now, the description for this is a radio controlled Subaru car. Okay, image location we're not using, that's going to be later on when we put pictures onto the form, and the seller ID for this one is A Smith, and 2 zeros and a 1 on the end. Okay, and the listing start date when this went into the barn was actually the 29th of August. So we need to go back a bit from where we are now. It was the 29th of August, and that was 2018. So you can use the date picker here to enter dates in. Okay, so a few of the dates are backdated from when we were working on this originally, and that's our first item done. Now there's a whole lot of other items to do. If we go here, we've got a list of them here in the guide. So we've got all of those stock items to enter, all right? So we're just gonna pause the video and then we'll enter those stock items and then we'll be back. Okay, so what we've got here is we've completed entering the data into the table. Now you'll notice that our remote control car is now further down the table down here. It's put them into alphabetical order on the item ID code we entered. If you do want to sort them, there is a little button up here, a little arrow next to that, and you could sort them backwards, but usually it is sort A to Z. Okay, now this one is finished, so we can now save this. So to save a table, you click in the very top left-hand corner and just click save, and that saves the table. In Access, it's important to only have one thing open at a time that you're working on. So this one is now completed, so we're just going to hit the close button there. Now the next thing we need to do is create another table, and this is going to be the sellers table, all right? Now we've already created it, but basically look, it's a matter of going create table, and then when you flick over to design view, or it's going to ask you to save the table here, save as, and you'll put in the table name of sellers. Okay, and it's the same thing. We need to get into design view. We've got a whole lot of fields here to define and set them as certain values and certain lengths. So there's certain sizes on the fields. If you don't know what those sizes are, we need to go back to the Excel spreadsheet, and it has all the lengths down in here in the length column. That tells you the size of each of those fields. All right, now we've already made the sellers table. We'll just go on the home tab here and across into design view so you can see. So there's a seller ID, that's the key for the table here. So that's a unique identifier. Now, how you set keys is on this. See up the top, there's a primary key indicator button. So if you turn that off, this won't be a primary key. It won't be a unique identifier, but we actually need it turned on. And when you type that in as your first field, Access had it typed in. And down here, we can see the length for that is 9. So all of these are in short text. Now you may be wondering, why is not the phone number set up as a number? Why have we put that in short text? Because phone numbers have got just numerical digits in it, so surely they should be a number. Let's just go back to Datasheet view, and you can see in Datasheet view we have zeros in front of all of our numbers here, and bank ID codes have zeros as well, and these are all numbers. But even though there's numbers there, they've all been defined as short text. Now there is a reason for that, and when you define phone numbers in Access, what will happen is if you change that in design view to be a number, you'll get a warning message that some data may be lost. We suggest you don't do this. Well, you can do it, but then you have to change it back again and put all your zeros in. But when you say yes, what will happen is because it's a number, like the number 10, we don't say as 010. The number 55, we don't say as 055. We just have it as 55. So Access does the same thing, and it just takes all the zeros off the front of your phone numbers. So look, they're no good as numbers. They always need to be short text. So there's a whole lot of data which needs to be entered into the sellers table, and then we'll have that data in there, but then we will find there's a problem. So let's go back to Access here, and you can see this is a fixed version of the table by the looks of it, but in the original design, we'd actually put payment made, bank receipt number, and date of payment are all in the sellers table. So let's stick to the original design and put those in. Payment made is a yes/no field, bank receipt number's text, and date of payment is date. So let's put them into the sellers table. So we'll just go across here into design view, and those fields which we needed, there were the payment made. So has a payment been made? And that's going to be short text, and the idea is that it's going to be yes or no. So what we'd need is, this is just a description field over here in the right, it doesn't matter what we type into it, but yes or no. So if it was going to be yes or no, we'd need to make that with a length of 3 down here. And then our next field is the bank receipt number for the payment. So when you pay the seller online with phone banking, when Passy does that with the business, what will happen is the bank will give him a receipt number, so he needs to record that down here in case there's any inquiries later on. And the bank receipt number will just make 20 long. And the other thing was the payment, date of the payment. So the date that Passy made the payment to the seller because that seller's items had sold. So that one needs to be a date time field. So if we go back to Datasheet view and say yes, you can see we've got those fields in there. And remember how we could go to the right hand side and get those double arrows and just stretch fields so that things would fit in. And we've got that there, all readily done. Okay, now there is a problem with this way the design was done originally, because Adam Smith might have 3 things for sale and we've only got capacity here to make one payment to him for one of the items getting sold. So we've made a mistake, and these fields here shouldn't actually be stored in the seller's table. Okay, so this bank receipt number, payment made, date of payment, they need to be moved across. They've got to actually go in the stock items table because it's each stock item that sells that has a payment to the customer made. Okay, so even though the payment's kind of happening for the seller, the customer seller, the actual payment is per stock item. So these 3 fields all need to actually go across into the other table. All right, these little kind of things will happen when you're doing a database, and luckily with Access, it's not a big deal to have to change things. So what we do is we just go into Design View here, and those 3 fields that we added in, if you right click here, there's a little gray square. So click in that gray square and then right click and you can do delete rows. So it will take that one out. On bank receipt number, we'll right click in the gray square next to it and do delete rows and say yes. And on date of payment, we'll right click and delete rows and say yes. Okay, so then we can go back to Datasheet view. That's our finished sellers table the way it needs to be. So click that top left-hand button there to save it, and that's saved. And we're done with that. Now we need to go to our stock items table, and we've already added them in, but here they are here. So you'd go into design view and you'd add in payment made, yes, no. Now we might as well make that just a field size of 1. Instead of using yes and the words no, we could just use Y or N as a 1 character field. So let's make that change. We're just changing that to 1. And bank receipt number is there. Now bank receipt number is at 255. That's a little long. A bank receipt number probably only needs to be a field size of 20 down in here. And obviously the payment date is in date time. So this is all good. Design view is finished, and we can go to Datasheet view, saving our table along the way. It gives this warning, some data may be lost. That's okay. Just click yes, and here we go. And we've got all of our payment mades are set to N. They're just all set to no because nothing's been sold yet, and so no payments have been made. Although 2 items here actually have been sold, the lens and the lady's mountain bike, but obviously Passy hasn't got round to making out a bank payment to them yet on his phone and entering the bank receipt. So that's our stock items table finished. Top left-hand corner, we can save that and we can close it. Okay then, if you'd like to pause and take a break now, please feel free to do that. Okay, we just realized that with the sellers table, all this data which needs to be entered, how did we know what to do there? Well, when you get the guide which goes with the lesson, it's going to give you somewhere in here, I think actually right up the end, we've got all the data for the table. So buyers, stock items, just go down, sellers and buyers. So yeah, at the end of the guide, there's all of this data which needs to go into the sellers table, or you could just pause the video, I guess, and look at it. And we need to see what we're up to next. So we've got all of that in, we've got primary keys for the tables. We just need to make sure they're set up. And then once they are set up, we can do our relationships linking. So let's just check the primary keys. Okay, in design view on the sellers table, the seller ID here is the primary key. That's the unique identifier, so that's all set up. If we go back to Datasheet view, you can see they've all got their unique ID code down the left-hand column there, so that's all good. On the stock items table, if we go back to design view, the primary key was the item ID code with a length of 10. If we flick to Datasheet view, we can see all of those stock items have an item ID code, so that's all good. Now, the next thing we do is we set up database relationships, because when this item sells, the lens here, it's just got the seller ID and the stock item, Darshan 001, but we need to know who that is. So we need to link this seller ID up to this table so that for the seller's table, we can find Darshan 001 and we can work out who it is and what their bank account info is to pay them because the item's been sold. So we do this relationship linking between the tables. We do that in Access. Now, if we go across to Access, you need to go on Database Tools up the top here, and we go to Relationships. All right, now we've already got relationships set there, so let's just delete them. Let's just take this table off. So when you went in there originally, if you had clicked on the sellers table, let's just close that and save it. Okay, so if we were clicked on the sellers table on the left-hand side and we went to database relationships, it would just bring up the sellers table, okay? And that's probably what's going to happen when you do your database if you're following along with us. So there we can just stretch the side of that, wait till you've got the double arrows, then push down your mouse and stretch it, and that's the seller information. Now there's also a stock items table. We need to bring that into this relationships window here. How you do that's a bit tricky. You have to right click and show table. So it's right click, show table, pick the one you want, stock items, and add that in. Okay, if you want to hide that table, click on it and hide table. That takes it away. So it's right click, show table, pick the one you want and put it in. Now, for some reason, Access has got plenty of room here, but it's chopped down our table and made it too short. So we need to get down the bottom and stretch that out a bit so we can see everything. Now we need to think, what were the items that we were trying to link together? Well, we were trying to work out when an item sells, there's a seller ID for the person that sold it. Now that seller ID, we need to go to this table and find that seller ID so we can find out who they are and find out their banking information. So you actually just push down on this one with your mouse and drag across to the other one, and there's a little plus sign there, and then you let go. This will bring up a confirmation window. So it's saying, do you want to join the sellers table seller ID, which is this one here, to the stock item seller ID, which is this one down here. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. That's what we were connecting up. So you say create. When you do that, there is then a line here which has created the relationship with those tables. Now this relationship creation is very important, and make sure you don't miss this step. Now you don't actually save that. You hit a close button up here, a red X, and that will save the relationship, okay? And the relationship is done. We'll just refer here to the guide notes, see what we need to do next. We've got all of that, primary keys, we've done relationships, that's all good. And now we just need to look at our database settings, okay? When you open up a table here, it comes out and fills the screen up. There's two ways of having database settings. There's tabbed documents and resizable windows. We always want to be using resizable windows. Now, where you set that up is a bit obscure. You go to File, and then down here there's a thing called Options. So click on Options. That'll bring up this window here, and the options we want to look at are the second ones here for the current database. So go to the second one and click on that current database. In here you can put the name of your database, and that will show up in the top of the screen. So make sure you enter that, Passy's Bargain Barn. Now, the one we want to look at here is Document window options. See how we've got overlapping windows? Yours might have tabbed documents ticked. We do not want tabbed documents. You need to use overlapping windows. Okay, now that's the main thing there. And you say okay. Now, sometimes you have to actually save your database and restart it to get the options to take effect. This will become a lot more important when we do forms in the forms lesson. Okay, so we've got all that set up. Now, to save the database, we've finished setting up the tables, we've entered all of our data. To finish off now and save the database, when you have something open like the stock items table, up in the top left-hand corner, you had this little save button. Now, that just saves that item that's open on the screen. We haven't actually saved our whole database. So to save our whole database, we need to go File, and then you go Save As. Okay, on the Save As screen, we want to save an Access database. So make sure Access database here is selected, and you go Save As. Now, for Save As, we need to go to where we were saving this. Remember, we went to where we had our Access work, and it was the Bargain Barn work that we were saving it as. So in here, you set the name, Bargain Barn Work. It's a Microsoft Access database, and you hit save, and we want to replace ours in this case, so there it is, it's saved. Now, often after you've saved, or when you first load up a database, see this little guy, Enable Content in the yellow line? Always just click that, and then that sort of makes your database live and active and ready to go. And that is kind of it for setting up those sellers and stock items tables. But for a little assignment for you guys to have a go at doing is we need to have a buyer's table. Okay, a great idea is to have a buyer's table. If people will give you their information when they buy something, they don't have to, then you can keep that information and use it for marketing purposes. So you guys set up in Design View this table with these field headings, and then once you've got that set up, go to Datasheet view, and here's the data which needs to be entered in. So that's a kind of little side assignment that can be done. And there's our final design. There's all of the data which should be in the table. So if you get the accompanying document, that will show you all of that. Now, where do we go to next? We've created the database and tables with the test data. So this is like building a house where you lay down the foundations and they're now in place, and we can start now adding other things in. This is the building blocks of the database, a very important step to complete correctly. Now, the next lesson will be on creating queries, and so we'll be looking at that one in the next lesson. Now, it is best you do the lessons in order, but you can skip. They are all self-contained. So if you're interested in finding out about how you can add images onto forms, because you've already made some forms before in Access, that's fine. You can skip to the lesson that's on that. But if you're doing the course as a beginner, it's best to just do it in this order. So that will be the next item that we're doing. And so, thank you very much. And that's the end of our lesson on creating tables and creating the database. And we hope that you are now starting to get a bit of a handle on learning Microsoft Access, and we will see you in the next lesson.